Hello and welcome to the morning sports briefing here on New Zealand Sports Radio on Wednesday, the 13th of May. We have been coming to you at 8 a.m. every single morning for about the last 5 weeks, but we have stepped down to level 2 tomorrow. And whilst that happens, we know that you people will be spending more time commuting to work. And so we are going to take the sacrifice and get up earlier and have the show from 7 a.m. tomorrow morning, so that all of you people who do commute can listen to us on your podcast on the way to work, so you can start your day the best way, up to date with all the important sports information. So from 7 a.m. tomorrow morning here on New Zealand Sports Radio. Don't forget to search for that, New Zealand Sports Radio, on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, all your favourite podcatchers. Today in the news, we have Premier League clubs facing a 340 million TV refund. Women's World Cup qualifier postponed until 2021. No more scoring against the post. And NRL players stood down for the season. So let's crack on with that straight away with the football. Yes, the EPL over in England could be facing a 340 million TV refund, even if the season resumes. So imagine how much that would be if the season doesn't resume. The Premier League clubs are due to earn a total of were due to earn a total of £9.2 billion from broadcasters for the 19 to 2022 cycle. Now, there had been predictions of at least a £1 billion loss. Now, obviously, that's not just from the TV rights, but also from lack of gate takings, sponsors dropping out, etc., all of those sort of things. But a large chunk of that looks like it's going to be paying back both domestic and international TV broadcasters. So you can understand why they are so adamant about trying to get it live, when some players have been saying, look, just can the season. The Premier League is reconsidering neutral venues. Apparently around half of the clubs have said they are anti-neutral venues, or a significant majority, over half the clubs, with Watford, Aston Villa and Brighton coming out publicly. They're the ones who said it behind closed doors. So they're going to go back to the organisers, that sort of police, government, safety officials, to see whether they can change that one for their return. So yes, so what happens next? They've got various meetings basically over the next few days, and the 12th of June is when they are aiming to return for their first fixture, and we'll see if they get the go ahead with that. I'm going to hand you over now to Ashwin, who will take us through the cricket news today.
Good morning, Paul, and good morning to the listeners out there and viewers. And Women's World Cup qualifier postponed until 2021. That's right. In a move that will surely affect the Women's ODI World Cup that was planned for February 2021 here in New Zealand, this is likely to have an impact to it. The qualifier matches that were supposed to be for the 2021 World Cup have been postponed. And as of yet, there is no date confirmed for when they will go ahead. Obviously, that's why it's going to have an impact, because if they haven't played the World Cup qualifiers in time, then obviously they're going to have to push the World Cup event itself. Also postponed were the matches related to the Under-19 World Cup. And the Universe boss, Chris Gayle, could be in hot water for his remarks in reaction to the former franchise, the Taliwas. Now, West Indies cricket president has mentioned the possibility of a sanction against Chris Gayle for bringing the CPL, that's the Caribbean Premier League, into disrepute. This all follows a heated YouTube outburst by Gayle against Ramanuj Sarwan and the Taliwas. Gayle called Sarwan a snake and very deceitful. Sarwan retaliated by saying that Gayle had false accusations and had been scandalous. All this had started because the Taliwas had released Chris Gayle, get this, without actually letting him know. And quite understandably, the global superstar got his tits in a tangle because he'd been let go without being notified. In the meantime, he has actually joined with another of the CPL franchises. I'll just get rid of my little thingy here so I can read the rest of it. And finally, in the UK, the counties are trying to bring back T20 Blast onto the radar. They are basically presenting a paper to the ECB and the government on how the Blast could go ahead with social distancing restrictions being eased slightly. Now, the one thing that the counties do realise is that financially, the T20 Blast just simply is not viable if they don't have the crowds there watching the games. So we'll see how that transpires. That could be a leader towards what cricket actually gets played in the UK. Now, join us, as I've mentioned before yesterday, and I'll mention again today, Swinging from the Hips, Thursday, 8 p.m. We'll go over some of the implications with the World Cup qualifiers being postponed. That's the women's one. We're going to be talking women's cricket from out of Australia and the impact that the women's Big Bash has had over there. So we'll tag this on in terms of what the impact will be and get the view of our host, Hussein Hamid, who will be joining us on this show on Thursday. And that's the cricket news for today, Paul.
Thank you very much, Ashwin, for that update. We're going to start our rugby update. And we heard news that, or there's been lots of rumours that the number of players going overseas is going to be reduced. But you know what? It's definitely not going to stop, as we've heard that Kurtley Beale has confirmed his move to France. He'll be joining Racing 92 on a 2-year stint at the end of this season. He will still play for the Waratahs during the Super Rugby over the 10-week tournament that Australia are looking to put together. He will be joined by fellow Australian Luke Jones, who will be leaving the Melbourne Rebels at the end of this season as well. So whilst there might be a reduction in the number of players, there will still be some players who will be heading overseas to France. Also, community sport can only resume at level 2 if you have 10 or fewer participants. Well, that is at least initially. Remember, those numbers will be changed even at level 2, and the guidance will change as well. So keep an eye out for that. But that does mean, obviously, that we will not be having that 7-a-side or even full football matches because look, this just has too many people. So they'll be looking. Obviously, as the numbers increase, we'll get more and more community sport. But that does mean that at least some training will be able to happen soon. Please check out the guidelines with your local clubs and with your local associations as to what is going on in that space. I'm going to hand you over now to Stephen for our birthdays before we come back and talk about Super Rugby.
Good morning, Paul, and good morning, everybody tuning into NZ Sport Radio this morning. Birthdays today: a dual Country League international, a well-travelled provincial journeyman, and a Blackburn World Cup winner, and that's where we start the birthdays this morning. Charmaine McMenamin, born this day, the 13th of May 1990, is a New Zealand rugby union player. She made her debut for the Black Ferns against England in 2013. She was selected in the 2017 Rugby World Cup Black Ferns that went on to win the tournament in Ireland. McMenamin, who turns 30 today, has made 14 appearances for New Zealand in her favoured position of number 8. Moving on, Trent Wairemu Kitahi Renata, born this day, the 13th of May 1988, is a New Zealand rugby union player who has represented New Zealand Māori and currently plays for Wellington in the Mitre 10 Cup. Renata, who turns 32 today, has also played for Waikato, Otago and Tasman in provincial rugby, as well as the Mogliano Vento club in Treviso, Italy, during the 2015-2016 season. And finally, Josh Papali, born this day, 13th of May 1992, is a professional rugby league footballer who plays as prop, second row and lock for the Canberra Raiders in the NRL. He has played for both Australia and Samoa at international level. He has played for Queensland in the State of Origin Series and the Prime Minister's 13. Papali, who turns 28 today, has played 11 tests for Australia, making his debut in 2013 before changing allegiance to his native Samoa in 2017. Now, interestingly enough, Papali was also born in Auckland as well. So that just once again brings into question eligibility, you know, in sort of international sport. And if you sort of look through his record, born in Auckland, plays State of Origin for Queensland and gets to represent Australia and Samoa. It's something to think about, isn't it? That's birthdays for today.
Thank you very much, Stephen. It certainly is, but I think you have missed one of the most important and biggest birthdays of the day. Ashwin, please bring us up to speed.
Yeah, big shout out to my daughter Alicia, the challenging little child that she is, and she has her birthday today on 13th of May back in to 2013. Oof, lucky I've got to remember these things as a dad, eh? In 2013 at 5 o'clock she turned up. And as she reminded me this morning, she's not quite 7 yet. She's 7 at 5 o'clock this afternoon. So happy birthday to my lovely little daughter, Alicia.
Happy birthday, Alicia. We'll be catching up soon. So moving on to Super Rugby news. And there has been a lot of talk around different players that will be maybe joining or not joining in Aotearoa. And hopefully I'm getting that pronunciation better now, boys. Aotearoa Super Rugby. No, I'm not, apparently, according to Ashwin. Sorry, folks. I will be working on that over the coming weeks. Looking at the Highlanders say it's very unlikely that Liam Squire, Elliot Dixon and Jackson Hemapo will be joining them. Aaron Major says, look, they had 16 new players. They understand that it has taken them a while. So they weren't preparing and performing as they wanted to prior to the lockdown. Here's a lot of those players have taken on board a lot of what the coaches have said, and they're looking at being much better when they do come back. It does look like, though, that Nay Milner-Skudder will be back on our screens in Super Rugby for the Highlanders. And so looks they have bolstered their squad a little bit. Clearly, he's had shoulder injuries basically since the 2015 Rugby World Cup, which has stopped him from going over to Toulon, and hence that's why he is here. Moving up the island, Sam Whitelock has been cleared to play for the Crusaders. So he will be back playing for them. And then moving further up to the Chiefs, Brodie Retallick is back on his farm down in Hawke's Bay, back from his Japan trip, but he will not be available for the Chiefs. They have agreed. So some players are back, some players aren't back. It's all interesting. It's all fun and games heading towards the kickoff of Super Rugby on the 13th of June. Looking at the Highlanders, and whilst other franchises have had to lay off people, the Highlanders said they're going to survive. They put some good plans in place without having to make any redundancies. And he said they put those good plans in place with the expectation that there will be no Super Rugby through till the end of the year. So having some cash coming in due to the TV revenue is a added bonus for them. Whilst we've heard that obviously the Crusaders and I think it was the Blues, or was it the Chiefs? I can't remember now. That they have been have had to make staff cuts. It does look like the Highlanders have survived without having to do that. They have received $126,532.80 on the wage subsidies to covering 18 employees down there at the Highlanders. Obviously, all of the players are contracted centrally, so that's a separate issue. And that brings you up to date with all of our rugby news. We had the Hash Rugby Chat last night where we talked about New Zealand rugby finances. So go check out that on your latest podcast. Remember to search New Zealand Sports Radio on your favourite podcatcher. I'm going to hand you over now to Stephen for our league update.
Good morning again, everybody. Now, there's a bit of NRL news to get through this morning, a little bit around a couple of players who effectively been suspended for the rest of the season. And, of course, there's a bit more news in and around the young lad, Cleary, who basically obviously didn't practice safe social distancing, and the Warriors have signed a prop. But we'll start with the first bit of news. The NRL's reported request for unvaccinated players to be cleared to play in Queensland this season has been shut down, effectively wiping out Titans pair Bryce Cartwright and Brian Kelly for the season. Queensland Chief Health Officer Jeanette Young on Tuesday said the government will not only grant flu shot exemptions to NRL players on medical grounds. She stated personal beliefs and ethical concerns are not covered in the list of exemptions. Now, just reading through this particular article, the players who are not allowed to train or play in what appears to be very bad news for Cartwright and Kelly as the NRL pushes to make their return start on May 28th. Now, this duo have not trained since the NRL government pretty much have held firm on a no jab, no play policy. I believe it was promised in the game's biosecurity guidelines. I know Paul and I spoke about this pre-show, and Paul might want to add a little bit more to that. I'll quickly jump to the second story. James Hooper says the Penrith playmaker. Now, James Cooper is a journalist for the Daily Telegraph. Now, Cleary is lucky to have only copped a 2-game suspension and a $30,000 fine for lying about his whereabouts when he broke social distancing rules. The Daily Telegraph reported on yesterday that the 22-year-old allegedly lied a second time to the integrity unit while Cleary was at his home when the TikTok video was filmed. It's alleged he wasn't there for the entire day and left to pick some girls up. Or it should be and left to pick the girls up, beg your pardon. Don't want to cast aspersions. The new details better explain why May had also been sanctioned with a 2-game suspension and a $15,000 fine. He pretty much quoted, "I'm not an angel. I'm not going to sit here and try to expose as though we're some sort of moral compass. But I reckon the most crucial element of this is that he wasn't at his house." So that's a blatant porky Hooper said on Fox League Live. He's another journalist as well. And finally, in league news this morning, the Warriors signed highly rated Sharks prop Toby Rudolph from 2021. The Warriors are set to announce the signing of 24-year-old front rower Toby Rudolph from the Sharks next season. Stuff understands that from sources in Australia that an announcement from the club is imminent, with the highly touted Rudolph deciding to join the Warriors instead of signing a new contract at the Sharks. Rudolph, who was born in Sydney, played in the Sharks' first 2 games of the season before the NRL went into lockdown and one of the club's standout players. Sharks coach John Morris has been impressed with Rudolph in the opening games and was keen on keeping him long-term in the Shires, while other clubs were also after him. But before he had made his NRL debut, the Warriors recruitment and retention manager Peter O'Sullivan already knew about Rudolph's potential, and the Penrose-based club have convinced him that the best move for his career is to come to Auckland. If it wasn't for the NRL season being suspended, the deal to get Rudolph to the Warriors could have been completed a few weeks ago. But with games starting up again in just over 2 weeks, the deal can be completed. Just a few stats about before I go. On Rudolph at 106 kgs and 190 centimetres, Rudolph will give the Warriors plenty of mobility up front as he's strong and fast ball runner, and also won't take a backward step when it comes to putting in the big tackles. Now, this young guy also grew up as a Rabbitohs junior, so he's certainly been around a couple of clubs, but by the sound of it, a lot of potential. But just back to our one of our previous stories, Paul, just with regards to vaccine, you've got a couple of thoughts on it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the reason behind it, folks, because obviously a flu vaccination does not protect you from coronavirus. However, what it will do is it will reduce the number of players, a number of people who have got symptoms that are similar to coronavirus, and then therefore will have to go away for an extra test or have to self-isolate whilst those tests come back. And so that's why they're doing it, is because the logistics of having to keep all these players self-isolating, unself-isolating, going off to extra tests, etc., would obviously complicate things. Also, it's around the fact that these people are going to be bubbling, so they're going to be spending much more time together, and so there is much more chance of a flu outbreak amongst them as well. So hence, from those points of view, that's why they're asking people to take these flu vaccinations. In rugby, for Super Rugby, it is going to be something that's heavily recommended, but will not be mandatory. So a different approach taken here over here in New Zealand for the Aotearoa rugby, and with lots of laughing in the background that you won't be able to hear, thankfully. for that pronunciation. One news story that I missed out on the rugby, sorry folks, was that World Rugby has outlawed tries against the post. This comes into immediate effect. That grounding against the post protectors will not be considered a try any longer. The reason for this is that post protectors have got bigger and bigger to protect the players for player welfare reasons, which has made it nigh on impossible for teams to defend tries against the post. And also has meant that we've seen people ripping post protectors away and throwing them out of the way to try and defend that post, which obviously leads to extra potential risk of injury. The simplest thing all round is to say that tries against the post are no longer eligible. Moving on to other sport, as I play around with all the settings. In Formula One, Sebastian Vettel is going to leave Ferrari at the end of the season. Ferrari has said it's not easy to reach, given Sebastian's worth as a driver and as a person. But he does say it was mutual. The time has come to go our separate ways in order to reach our respective objectives. Vettel said no longer a common desire to work together. He said that it wasn't about financial matters. It was just about wanting to work together and having joint goals. In many cases for Formula One, what you'll have a lead driver and a very much a second place driver. When Charles Leclerc joined, he came in very much as that as the lower ranked driver, but ended the season with better results in every single category. So obviously the pecking order has changed, or that has forced the pecking order change at Ferrari, and probably what has led to this. He has come out and said it's been a huge honour for him to be a teammate of Vettel, and whilst they've had some tense moments on the track, it's always been a matter of respect and good ones off it, even though that might not have been the perception from outside of the camp. He said he has never learnt as much from a teammate as him, so he says thank you to Sebastian Vettel. Quite where he will go, there's lots of speculation. Obviously, whenever a world champ and such a big name becomes available, so there's lots of speculations where he might go, or even if he will leave the sport entirely. On the flip side, there's also a lot of speculations there who will replace him at Ferrari. So expect a lot of news on that over the coming weeks and maybe even months. Over in horse racing, and the government has announced a 72.5 million emergency package for horse racing. Winston Peters says it's been a perfect storm with COVID-19, as they've also been going through a restructure there. Apparently, RITA, the association that sort of runs horse racing, would have been in liquidation or gone bankrupt on Friday if this hadn't have happened. And so you can understand why the government has stepped in. 26 million of that will go straight into paying people and paying off the bills. Whereas as much as 20 million will be provided for 2 new synthetic tracks to help with long-term viability of the sport. 32 races last year, or meetings last year, had to be called off due to ground conditions. And so this obviously this will help them long term. There is also a 3rd track being in Cambridge, also already being built with the with the Provincial Growth Fund backing of 6.5 million. Moving on to the athletics, and the anniversary games 2020 have been cancelled in the United Kingdom. This was expected to take part on the 4th to 5th of July. And UK Athletics says they are hugely disappointed. You'd think that I will be surprised that it's taken this long to cancel a meet like that, which requires travel from lots of different places, bringing athletes in from lots of different places around the world. It will have a significant impact, financial impact, on UK athletics and wider sport. Coates has added, obviously, this was it's one of the biggest events for UK athletics this year. So that's going to have a big impact there. And finally, Shaquille O'Neal has called for the NBA season just to be scrapped. He says that any team that wins the season, that wins the title this season, will come with an asterisk if they have to mess around with the final series and rejig it. He thinks they should just scrap, everyone get healthy, and come back next season. Not only is he a NBA legend, but he's also a big broadcaster over in the US at the moment on basketball. So you're going to see his opinion will obviously be discussed greatly over there. That means you have now started the day the best way. You are up to speed with all of the important sports news. Don't forget to join us tomorrow at 7 a.m. for the morning sports briefing, or you can listen to the recording on your podcast. Just search for New Zealand Sports Radio on Acast, iHeartRadio, iTunes, or Spotify. And the long talk today is with Sean Callanan. He is an esports team owner. So an interesting one today at 2 p.m. Do join me for that one as well.